The trip has multiple purposes. One of them is there's a whole medical component where we'll have a team of this year we had 8 nurses and a pharmacist. Last year we had a physical therapist who was my wife Danette, who actually got her physical therapy degree from then Beaver College. But yeah, there's a medical component where we'll run clinics, and there's a component where we ship over in advance. We fill up an entire sea container, a 40-foot container with about 1,000 boxes of clothes and medicine and things of that sort. So we'll have we do a lot of clothing distribution. We also run sports and arts camps for the kids that are over there, and there are a lot of children in Swaziland. Actually, there are a lot of orphans in Swaziland. It's the nation with the highest HIV infection rate. So there are a lot of young kids who've been orphaned by AIDS. So we try to reach out there, provide clothing and medical care and things like that. And then and in addition to all that, I was also part of the prayer team, which was particularly interesting because I tend to be more of a quiet Presbyterian, and the Swazi people particularly like it if you pray nice and loud. So I had to suck on a lot of halls because I was getting a sore throat praying the Swazi way, but that was excellent. During the 2 weeks that I was there, I hauled an enormous amount of things, mostly boxes of clothes, and so what we would do is we would show up at a particular location, and we went to about 8 different locations all over Swaziland. Swaziland's a relatively small country. It is slightly smaller than New Jersey, so we covered a lot of different areas. And what we would do is we would show up, and I did a lot of logistics of just helping things get set up, carrying all the boxes, setting up the medical stations, and things like that. And then once the medical stations and the clothing distribution stations were set up, we would try to bring people through in an orderly way. And then, as I mentioned, I was also on the prayer team. So after they would go through and visit a nurse and deal with whatever diagnosis there was, then a lot of people really appreciated getting prayed for. So we would come over and pray for them. Also ended up doing some very specific things to try to help out the medical team some. Specifically, there was a little boy who came in with cerebral palsy. And he was 3 years old. He could not sit up. He had no muscle tone in his neck, so his head would flop back and forth. And he didn't eat particularly well because he had very little muscle tone in his mouth and in his throat. So we did some high-tech things. Specifically, I videoed him on my phone, and then figured out how to upload that from Swaziland. That was a little bit of a challenge, and then I was able to call my wife and share the video with her and get some physical therapy exercises that we could do. So we taught the child's mom how to help him sit up, how to do some exercises that were aimed at helping him to learn to crawl. And then we also went on what it looked like for a while to be a wild goose chase of trying to find a car seat for him, because if he was able to sit up, Nanette really thought that would strengthen the lateral muscles in his neck. It would really help with the feeding, and would cut down on the possibility of him getting pneumonia, since a lot of his time was spent just laying on his belly, which would put pressure on his lungs. And it took a good amount of time before we finally found a very obscure store behind a gas station that had several imported goods, including car seats. So we got him a little car seat that fit very well, and his mother was extremely excited about that helped with his feeding right away. And anyway, she was very excited about the fact that she had an exercise program that was heading towards strengthening him, and that he had a better regimen for feeding going forward. The language they speak is Siswati, and I had a CD in my car for 3 months leading up to the trip, trying to practice my Siswati. I was horrible at it, and the enjoyable thing about this was that the Swazi people enjoyed the idea that someone was trying to speak their language. So for the most part, I would stumble through some greetings until we were all laughing, and then we would either switch to pantomime or using a translator. There were a good number of Swazi people who spoke some English, so we were able to communicate in that way. One of the things that's very evident about the Swazi people is that they're extremely friendly. So as you make an effort to engage, they're right there with you, and they're excited to meet new people and be engaged with you. So that worked out a lot. As you know, well, I mentioned the example of butchering the language as I was trying to learn it, but that actually led to a number of good interactions where we had the ability to they were helping me pronounce things. So they were friendly. They love a good joke. One of the other stories that came out that I was very excited about was that there was a woman named Belina who Nanette had met when she was there last year. And last year she was not able to walk, and Nanette gave her some exercises that she could do to strengthen her legs. And she was a woman who's about 70 years old and suffering from arthritis, and she was taking care of six grandchildren. Belina really exemplifies the friendly and loving to joke around bit of the Swazi culture, because when she met me, Nanette had specifically asked me to track her down and make sure I found Belina and give her greetings and stuff. And I had a picture of Nanette and myself. So when Belina saw that it was Nanette and remembered her, she was extremely excited. And I said, "Well, this is a picture of my beautiful wife. Unfortunately for you, I'm also in the picture." Well, Belina thought this was hilarious and insisted that I was indeed handsome, but she thought perhaps I would be more handsome if I would grow a beard. So she was stroking my chin and explaining to me that I would, it would really come out if I had a nice little beard. So that was a fun interchange. It was also very exciting to see that she was able to walk again. That a lot of those exercises had really worked for her, and that was a significant improvement over the past year. The perception of the people that I talked to from Swaziland, of the United States, well, there are a couple of things. One is there's a general appreciation that we now have we now have an African American president. That's generally perceived as a good thing. They're very excited about that. But in terms of having much idea of the political or cultural situation in the U.S., there's very little understanding of that, and that was one of the things that I found in particular as I was talking to the younger people. The question was just, what is it like? And they didn't have a lot of understanding of what American culture would be like. The general perception was everybody has a lot more money, and it's a lot easier to get food. They're not there's not much of a crisis with large pieces of the population being unemployed and trying to scrape together. But other than that, it seemed like the perception was mostly pretty vague, and although there was a curiosity about it, so a lot of the conversations I had was like that. In fact, one conversation I had was with a young man who was just starting to who was just starting school in Mancini in Swaziland, and he was hoping possibly to transfer to school in South Africa. He was extremely excited to hear that I worked at a university and asked me about Arcadia. And when I told him that we had approximately 4,000 students, he was amazed that there could exist such a large university, which is an interesting perception because, you know, Arcadia is not generally considered huge. But yeah, the idea of 4,000 students was enormous and mind-blowing for him. Their currency is tied 1-to-1. So the rand and the Swazi currency, whose name I can't pronounce and has about 20 syllables in it. The exchange rate is pegged 1-to-1. Probably about 80% of Swaziland's border is with South Africa. There's a small part that borders Mozambique. So there's definitely dependence there. There's a lot of a trade relationship there, but there's definitely a difference as well. Swaziland, for the most part, never tended to come under colonial rule, although there's a good amount of European influence during the colonial period. Swaziland tends to be pretty far. It's a 6-hour bus ride from Johannesburg into Swaziland, and it's shielded from South Africa by some mountains. So there's a certain amount of independence that was there, and in fact they still have. I believe it's still the last kingdom in Africa, and it's one of the last 5 kingdoms left on Earth in terms of the king actually ruling the country, right? So it's not a constitutional monarchy or anything like that. Well, one of the things that I've noticed whenever I've traveled, but in Swaziland in particular, that really really came out was just the understanding that that for much of the world, just points of survival are much closer to the surface. As a general rule, whenever we would go out as a team, we would just make a whole big pile of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we would just have peanut butter and jelly for lunch every day. As an American, I can tend to complain about that over time. 2 weeks in a row straight of peanut butter and jelly isn't all that great. One of the comments that came out from a previous trip, though, was that one of the translators who was working with us, who was Swazi, who knew English and Siswati both, pointed out that for her family, peanut butter and jelly was a treat that they would generally only have on Christmas. Usually, either get the peanut butter or the jelly, but to have both together in one shot was a big deal. So, just the understanding of dealing with people that are a lot closer to the edge of trying to meet basic needs of clothing and nutrition, tended to shift the perception of what's happening in the U.S. just looking through that filter. In terms of most need, I would lean toward education more than anything else, even though there's an enormous immediate financial need. In fact, speaking of the enormous immediate financial need, they just concluded a strike of elementary school teachers, and actually the nurses in the country went out on a sympathy strike with them. The tax rate across the board for Swaziland is there's a 1/3 income tax rate, and then in addition to that, in the past year they put in a 14% sales tax rate across the country. The teachers went on strike asking for a 4.5% raise, Their argument being that that they're already living in poverty, and the new 14% taxes really just pushed them over the edge. The immediate response was to fire the teachers, although they then petitioned the king, who then decided to grant their to grant their request. But that's right on the. I think that whole struggle right there encapsulates a lot of the issue. There's significant poverty, and even training the teachers to try to bring up the education level of dealing with what's there, so they have a long term. They have a long-term solution to some of the issues was difficult, because they were getting bogged down in the short term of teachers can't even afford to feed themselves on their salary. So it's a pretty big struggle that I think encapsulates a lot of the problem of poverty around the world. When you're trying to balance the short and long term of what's happening, it becomes very difficult. I was in some school buildings, but it was over the weekend, so I didn't get to meet many of the students. A friend of mine who traveled while we were there is a school teacher, and met a school teacher there, and had the opportunity to go and do a guest lecture. And his perception was that a lot of the education was a lot more rote memorization, and the idea of bringing upping the education to a point of pushing for more critical thinking would be something that's really a challenge and very worthwhile in the long term. I think this is the most difficult aspect of the trip. I mentioned the poverty and the difficulty of living life very much on the edge. I think one of the other things that's difficult is let's see. In Swazi culture, women aren't particularly valued, and I think one of the more heartbreaking things that I saw was a mother with an 8-week-old child came into a clinic, and both the mother and the child were severely malnourished, and we later discovered that at least the mother was HIV positive. I don't know about her son. And her husband had abandoned her when she was 8 months pregnant. There are a lot of issues surrounding that. One is that with an education system where most women aren't educated, her realization of any options for birth control or anything like that were extremely limited, and this son was either her 6th or 8th child. That we were having trouble with some of the translation there, but her husband's comment as he left was just that, you keep having babies and I can't have all this responsibility. And so that was one that was heartbreaking to hear, and that kind of willingness to just not. There's very little recourse that this woman had at that point, and like I said, she was severely malnourished and HIV positive, and we brought her to the hospital. And we supplied some food for her and for her son, and we're really trying to support her as much as we could. And in fact, the pastor and his wife of the church that we set up the clinic at that day have really been working to find her a place to live and to take care of her. And I think the saddest part of the trip was we found out about a week or so after we got back that the little boy didn't make it. He was 4 pounds, and he just really was so malnourished that they in the end couldn't help him.